For the past few years, I have been thinking about a motorcycle that I wish existed. In fact, if it had existed when it came time for me to actually get a bike, I think I would have bought it. Then Triumph announced a new motorcycle, and I'm not gonna lie, I thought for a second that this was going to be my bike, that this was gonna be the bike that I think Triumph needs to make. But then I saw it was going to be called the Trident, and as a student of British motorcycle history, I knew this wasn't my bike. Now, I'm not saying I don't like the Trident. In fact, I do. I think it's a fantastic bike, especially for how much it is. And I actually believe that what Triumph did with the Trident can be a blueprint for the bike that I think Triumph needs to make next. So when you look at the Triumph lineup, you have the modern classics, the adventure bikes, naked street bikes, and then you have the Rocket 3 kind of off in its own world. Now with the Trident, Triumph did something that I thought that they would never do, which is that they went back and made a smaller displacement version of the bikes that they have now. They made it more affordable. It's basically a middleweight version of their flagship class of naked street bikes, and in this case, triples. So the Trident is basically an entry into the triple lineup that they have already. It's more affordable, it's more accessible for beginner riders, like it's more beginner friendly, even though it's really not a beginner bike. And it still has all of that fit and finish that Triumph is known for, and it also leads the class in tech. In my opinion, this bike is the best bike in its class, and I really do believe that Triumph going forward is going to force all of the other manufacturers to up their game and stop making cheap motorcycles, like in terms of quality and fit and finish, to just stop like cheaping out on their bikes. Now, with all of that in mind, here is the motorcycle that I want to see next from Triumph. Maybe it's in a year, maybe it's in 5 years. I don't care. I just think they should start working on it if they're not already. So what I want to see is what I'm calling, and this should not be the name of the bike, like this would be a terrible name, but I'm going to call it a baby Bonneville, a true competitor to the Royal Enfield Interceptor and Continental GT. And in the same way that the Trident honestly blows most of the competition out of the water in that sort of middleweight street bike class, I want to see Triumph unleash a baby Bonneville, or just a baby modern classic that absolutely demolishes what Royal Enfield and a few other brands have to offer. So here's the problem, and here's why this bike needs to exist. The modern classic range from Triumph is just too expensive, and in my opinion, they're also too heavy. Now, few are going to deny me when it comes to price. Like, why would you buy a Bonneville for $10,500 when you could get the Trident for like $8, or the Interceptor for like $6? And the Trident is like 30% more horsepower, and it has way more tech. Of course, there are people who will still pick the Bonneville, but those are just people who have the money like available. And there's so many others who are gonna choose the Trident, who like the neo-retro look and who just like see it as a bike that makes way more sense, because it does make more sense. Now, in terms of being too heavy, I think there are some that might disagree with me on this, as 400 plus pounds is pretty standard for this segment, but in my opinion, it shouldn't be. And that's where Triumph can knock this out of the park if they do it right. This bike needs to weigh less. Basically, what I want to see is a bike that is a new version of my old Triumph. So my bike is a 1968 Triumph T100C. This is a 500cc engine producing just over 40 horsepower and weighing in at 380 pounds wet. So that's actually a correct number. Like, I know that number because I actually had to have my bike weighed to get it titled here in Hawaii. Now, this weight and power is literally perfect. My bike produces about the same amount of power as the Interceptor, but it weighs a good chunk less, and it's actually less cc's. Like, that's a bigger bike that weighs more, but produces about the same power, but my bike weighs less. But that's all beside the point. This bike, minus the fact that it's old, is the perfect beginner bike. It's got enough power to get you around and help you feel like what a real motorcycle feels like. And it's not too heavy, you know, it's not so heavy that it's going to get you in a ton of trouble or feel cumbersome. It's not too powerful. It's just the perfect power to weight ratio, in my opinion, for a new rider. Now, there's very little on this bike. There's no radiator, no electronics. It's very bare bones, but the materials are significantly heavier than what we use on modern motorcycles today, from the engine to literally the rest of the bike. I think my bike only has one plastic piece on it on the entire bike, and that is the taillight. So for Triumph today, make a bike that's around those same cc's, maybe 500, maybe 650, whatever, who cares? It's not a race for horsepower. It's not a race for CCs or anything. Just make the bike that makes sense and use all of the stuff that's on the other modern classics, but try to just get it a little bit lighter. Obviously the engine will already be lighter because it will be smaller, but who cares if the fenders are plastic? I mean, the fenders are already plastic, I think, on the modern classic range, but I could be wrong about that. Anyways, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know how to do it, but I would be shocked if the people at Triumph would say that they couldn't do that. I'm pretty confident they could make a sub 400 pound wet, middleweight or lightweight modern classic that still produces enough power to be fun. Basically, the Triumph Trident of modern classic, that's the bike that they need to make, in my opinion. There are so many new riders who would buy this bike and who want this bike. They want a retro motorcycle and they want a Triumph. Honestly, how many riders who pick an Interceptor would rather have a Triumph and who would want that quality and that history and that reputation? Everybody wants a Bonneville. Like, there's so many riders who want one. They're just so expensive. So make one that fits that new rider, lower horsepower, still enough to jump on the highway if you need to, maybe like 48 horsepower, but just really geared towards riders who are just getting their first bike and who want to have fun. Maybe it's a baby street twin, maybe it's a baby Bonneville, whatever it is, just a smaller displacement, lighter, more affordable, maybe like $7,000 to $8,000 range, and have it be a retro bike. I think it would be an absolute hit both overseas and here in the US. People are willing to pay a few thousand extra for a Triumph. It's worth it at that point because you're getting better quality. But I think there's a lot of riders who just aren't able to pay nearly double the price to get a street twin or a T100 when they could just go get an Interceptor or a Continental GT for like basically $5,500 or $6,000. If Triumph were to make this bike and they executed on it in the way that I know that they could, I don't think I'd be able to help myself. Like, I think I would just buy it. I wouldn't even ask my wife. My mouse would just click on the pre-order button and I would just go on with my day, not knowing that it even happened. So if anybody from Triumph is watching this video for some reason, just go to your management, go to whoever's above you and say, look, this is the bike we need to make because Bart wants it. Okay, I'll buy it, guys. Okay, I can't make that promise. I'm not gonna promise that I'll buy it, but I'll consider it. Okay, some of you guys might be wondering what is the bike in this thumbnail? And I wanted to explain this really quick. So this bike is actually a picture of an old Bonneville, or maybe it's an old T100 like mine, I'm not sure. I think it's an old Bonneville though. And I think it's probably early to mid 60s, probably like a 63 or 64 based on the white seat. Anyways, I took that original photo and I put the new street twin like tank on it. So I photoshopped it on it. And then I also took the Bonneville like black seat and photoshopped that on the bike. So it's kind of like an abomination of old and new motorcycle, just sort of mixed together, like old and new Triumph. I just wanted to use something different. Like I wanted to use the template of an old bike, like of an old Triumph, because it looks the same, but it also looks different than the newer Triumph. If I had just put like the T100 in the thumbnail, everyone would have been like, well, that bike already exists. Basically what I'm saying is I want my bike. I want an old Triumph that's new. I want it to be light. I want it to be affordable. And yeah, I want it to be awesome. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you like videos like this and check out my other videos. I've got a bunch of other videos. Also check out the playlist that's popping up right now for more videos that are of a similar genre. So yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Ride safe.